The moment you walked away, their soul learned the difference between losing a person and losing a legend. That's the part they don't say out loud. They pretend they're fine, they pretend nothing touches them, but inside, your final move hit them like a punch they never saw coming. Think of a chessboard where one player keeps bragging, acting clever, talking big, until the quiet player, the one they underestimated, makes a clean move that ends the whole game in 1 second. That's what you did. Simple, calm, no flexing, no chaos. And that's exactly why it haunts them. People forget loud drama. They don't forget silent power. And here's a fact even basic psychology teachers explain. The mind remembers the person who proved them wrong more than the person who ever loved them. That means this isn't about romance or guilt. It's about the hit to their ego. You didn't just leave. You left with your self-respect untouched. You left without letting them drag you into nonsense. You left after seeing the full picture, understanding the game, and walking out like someone who refuses to be played. That's the kind of exit that burns into memory. And thank you, chosen one. And don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing the like and subscribe buttons to help spread this message to more souls. It's something we all do together, spreading the light, keeping the mission alive. Thank you for being part of this force. Now, back to what matters. Your checkmate wasn't loud, but it was final. It didn't just close the door, it showed them the frame, the hinges, and the reason the whole thing fell apart. You became the moment they replay in their head when they're alone at night, staring at the ceiling, trying to act like they're the winner while their mind keeps throwing the truth in their face. They wanted you to react, to break, to beg, to fold. Instead, you stayed calm. You stayed clear. That calmness is the part hurting them the most. Your presence once balanced their chaos. Your absence exposes every crack they tried to hide. They didn't think losing you would feel like losing a mirror that showed them everything they needed to fix. They didn't expect the silence to be this loud. But silence hits harder when it comes from someone who actually mattered. When you stepped away, you didn't just walk out of their life. You took back your energy, your care, your support, your loyalty, all the things they thought would always be there waiting for them. They treated you like a leftover, and life hit them with the bill. Now they're stuck with memories they can't delete because you weren't just another person. You were the turning point. Every good moment they had with you became a reminder of how badly they messed up. Every bad moment they caused became a reminder of how patient you were. That's the real checkmate. When someone realizes they didn't just lose you, they lost the version of themselves that existed only because you brought peace into their world. They lost the stability they pretended they didn't need. They lost the one person who understood them without needing a manual. That kind of loss doesn't fade. It sticks. It lingers. It follows them like a shadow they can't outrun. And here's the truth they keep choking on. You weren't supposed to win. You weren't supposed to rise. You weren't supposed to stay calm while their whole plan fell apart. But you did. You walked away like someone who knew their worth from the start. That's the kind of move that rewrites a person's history, whether they like it or not. Tonight, you're going to understand exactly why they can't forget you, why your exit keeps echoing in their mind, why your name hits their thoughts like a notification they can't swipe away, and why the universe tends to protect people who move with truth, peace, and quiet strength. Because some exits are not just endings, they're lessons, and you, chosen one, became the lesson they'll never escape. And chosen one, thanks for staying locked in. Before we go deeper, take a second to ground yourself, because what comes next is going to explain exactly why your final move still echoes in their mind like a ringtone they can't mute. If you're ready to claim the power behind your checkmate, drop the number 777 in the comments so I know you're here with full intent. And if you feel called to support the team behind this message, hitting super thanks keeps this mission alive. Every bit of energy you send fuels the next truth we deliver. But for now, breathe, stay present, and let this sink in, because the next part hits even harder than the silence you left behind. And missing it would be like walking away right before the final plot twist. And now, chosen one, let's move forward step by step. If your spirit is awake, you'll feel the pull to stay until the very last word. Let's get into it. Number 1. The day their genius act collapsed like a cheap stage prop. Nothing humiliates a pretender faster than being outsmarted by the very person they thought was easy to control. That single truth hits them like a punch straight to the center of their ego, because deep down they built their whole confidence on the idea that they were always one step ahead of you. They swore they were the sharper one, the calmer one, the one who always knew more than you. But that fantasy only worked as long as you played along. The moment you stopped feeding their illusion, the whole show fell apart in seconds. They entered your life acting like some mastermind, convinced they could read you like an open book while they hid behind their little tricks. They thought you were simple, predictable, easy to manage. They thought you'd react on cue the same way every time. They assumed their excuses would keep working forever, their mind games would stay undetected, and their rehearsed lines would keep you stuck. They really believed you didn't see anything. But chosen one, the truth is, you saw everything. And here's the gut punch that keeps them awake at night. You were paying attention long before they realized it. You watched the pattern. You watched the switch-ups. You watched how their stories never matched. You watched how their energy changed depending on what they wanted. You watched who they became when they thought you weren't catching on. You weren't asleep. You were studying, quietly, patiently, sharply. Then came the day everything shifted. You didn't announce anything. You didn't argue. You didn't send a long message explaining your realization. You didn't break down or beg or give them a show. You simply began to understand the truth, and once the truth clicked in your mind, it changed the entire way you moved. That was the moment their illusion cracked. When you stopped reacting to their bait, they panicked. When you stopped falling into their emotional traps, they felt exposed. When you stopped giving them access to your peace, their tricks suddenly felt useless. And when you finally walked away calm, controlled, and unbothered, that was the moment they realized every move they made was predictable, while every move you made was intentional. Imagine a magician performing the same tired trick over and over, believing the audience is clueless, until one person in the front row sees exactly how the trick works. That's what you did. You caught the sleight of hand. You caught the misdirection. You caught the ego behind the mask. And you didn't clap. You simply stood up and walked out. That's why they're haunted. They weren't expecting you to grow, to wise up, to get sharper. They weren't expecting you to stay calm while their whole act fell apart. They weren't expecting you to play the long game with intelligence instead of emotion. And now, their mind keeps replaying the moment they realized you were way more aware than they ever gave you credit for. Here's another truth they choke on. People who depend on manipulation always assume they're the smartest one in the room. They assume everyone else is softer, weaker, slower, easier to fool. They can't imagine that the person they're trying to outplay is actually observing them with crystal clarity. That's why your silence cuts deeper than any confrontation ever could. Silence from someone who finally sees the game is the loudest punishment. And chosen one, let's be honest, they thought your kindness meant blindness. They mistook your patience for ignorance. They thought your loyalty meant you'd never notice the small betrayals or the shifting behavior. They thought they could keep you in the dark forever. But all along, you were growing. You were connecting dots. You were becoming someone they couldn't fool anymore. What hurts them isn't that you left. What hurts them is how you left. You walked away carrying your self-respect, your peace, your clarity, and your dignity. You walked away without breaking character. You walked away without stooping to their level. You walked away like someone who already solved the puzzle. And you left them sitting in the middle of their own maze, trying to figure out how the person they underestimated ended up being the smartest one in the room. The human mind obsesses over anything that challenges its ego, and you challenged their ego in the worst way possible by showing them their power over you was fake. They didn't lose control. They never had it. They were performing for an audience that wasn't impressed. Now, every time they think about you, they feel the sting of that realization. They feel the punch of losing to someone they thought would always be beneath them. They feel the humiliation of being read like a page when they believed they were unreadable. They feel the shock of seeing the quiet one walk away with more wisdom than the loud one ever had. And here's what really keeps them trapped inside their own head. They can't explain how you did it. They don't understand how you saw through them. They don't understand how your intuition got sharper than their manipulation. They don't understand why their tricks suddenly stopped working. It's like trying to solve a math problem with missing numbers. You became the equation they can't complete, the riddle they can't answer, the ending they never prepared for. Some nights they wonder, how long did you know? Some days they wonder, when did you figure me out? Some moments they wonder, what did they see that I didn't hide properly? And the unsettling truth is this: you saw everything. You just didn't expose them. You let the universe expose them instead. You let their own behavior reveal who they were. You let their inconsistency destroy their credibility. And you let your silence become the proof. The illusion they built was never strong. It only stood because they believed you wouldn't question it. But once you questioned it, everything crumbled. A person who relies on deceit falls apart the moment they encounter someone who sees truth clearly. And the moment you stepped into clarity, their whole identity took a hit. That's why your exit wasn't just an exit. It was an ego collapse. It was a mirror being held up. It was a truth they couldn't run from. They didn't lose you. They lost the version of themselves they pretended to be. They lost the confidence they built off your silence. They lost the power they thought they held. They lost the illusion that kept them feeling superior. This is the real checkmate. Not loud, not messy, not dramatic, just devastatingly true. And this is exactly why they can never forget you, because forgetting you would require them to forget the moment their whole image cracked. And that's something their mind refuses to let go of. You didn't shatter the illusion. Your intelligence did. Your calmness did. Your silence did. And chosen one, that's why the memory of you stays, because nothing haunts a pretender harder than the one who outsmarted them without ever needing to try. Number 2. The day you outgrew the person they depended on for power. Nothing terrifies a manipulator more than watching the version of you they controlled die and the version they can't touch take its place. That line hits them like a brick to the chest because it forces them to face the one truth they've been avoiding. The only reason they ever felt powerful was because you were still discovering your own. Every ounce of control they thought they had was built on an outdated version of you. A version that was more forgiving, more patient, more willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. A version that questioned itself instead of questioning their motives. A version that didn't yet understand the strength hiding in its own silence. But chosen one, growth doesn't schedule an appointment. Growth doesn't knock politely. Growth doesn't ask if anyone in the room is ready. It shows up, clears the dust off your vision, and quietly rewrites who you are. And the moment you stepped into that new version of yourself, everything they built their power on collapsed. People don't panic when you change. They panic when their access to the old you disappears. That's exactly what happened. They weren't scared of losing you. They were scared of losing the version of you that lifted them, excused them, calmed them, believed them, and gave them unlimited chances. They were scared of losing the you that made them feel bigger. Imagine this. Someone builds a throne out of cardboard, places it on top of sand, and then brags about ruling the whole beach. That was them. Their entire sense of superiority stood on something unstable, temporary, and completely dependent on you staying the same. The moment you grew, the sand shifted, and the throne collapsed. There was no power. There was just you believing you had less. Another example, imagine a person who depends on your silence to keep their lies standing. As long as you don't question anything, they feel untouchable. But once you start asking the right questions, even in your own mind, their entire ego begins to crack. Your growth wasn't loud, it was internal, and internal growth is the quietest but most dangerous kind. Then one day, something in you clicked. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped accepting half-truths. You stopped being afraid of losing someone who wasn't afraid of losing you. That shift wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was simple, clean, final. And that's when they felt something they didn't expect: fear. The minute you stop shrinking to make others comfortable, they start choking on the space you were meant to take up. You didn't just outgrow them. You outgrew the role they assigned you. You outgrew the place they trapped you in. You outgrew the small box they thought you would stay inside forever. And now they're left staring at the empty space where the old you used to stand, wondering how the person they underestimated became the person they can no longer access. The haunting part: they can't update their script fast enough. They still talk to you in their mind as if you're the old version, the soft version, and then realize that version is gone. Every attempt to reach you now feels like trying to unlock a door with a key that no longer fits. The lock changed. You changed. Imagine them standing there with their usual manipulation tactics, like tools in a broken toolbox. Nothing works, nothing fits, nothing lands. Their old tricks fall flat because you don't respond the same way anymore. Where you once hesitated, now you stand firm. Where you once doubted yourself, now you see everything clearly. Where you once reacted emotionally, now you move with intention. And here's the punch that stings them the most. You didn't leave because you were weak. You left because you became strong. You walked away, not because they pushed you out, but because you realized staying would require you to shrink again, and you refused to go backward. Growth doesn't reverse itself just to make someone else feel comfortable. You didn't become too much, they just stayed too small. And that truth eats at them every single day, because your evolution wasn't supposed to happen. In their mind, you were frozen in time, stuck in the same place emotionally, still unsure of your own power. They counted on your wounds. They counted on your doubts. They counted on your softness. They never counted on your healing. They never counted on your awareness. They never counted on your awakening. And when you outgrew the old version of yourself, you directly outgrew the version of you they held power over. Their entire ego depended on you staying exactly where they left you. But you didn't stay. You evolved. You expanded. You rose. Now they're haunted by questions they will never admit out loud. How did they change so much? When did they figure everything out? Who are they now? Why can't I reach them anymore? Why does my power feel weaker around them? Because, chosen one, the version of you they handled so easily no longer exists. They depended on your innocence, your hope, your softness, your willingness to see the best in people. They depended on your past. They depended on your heart not being fully aware yet. They depended on your boundaries still being under construction. But once your growth kicked in, the entire game changed. You now have clarity. You have boundaries. You have emotional intelligence. You can see patterns instantly. You can sense manipulation from miles away. Your intuition is sharper than their intentions. You're not the same, and that terrifies them. Here's the uncomfortable truth for your enemy. They didn't lose you to another person. They lost you to your evolution. And evolution is something they cannot fight, cannot control, cannot outperform. Now, every memory they have of you feels outdated. Every version of you they try to picture feels inaccurate. Every way they used to influence you feels useless. They're haunted because the old version of you made them feel powerful, but the new version of you makes them feel exposed. You didn't just leave their story, you rewrote your entire character arc. You upgraded in silence while they stayed stagnant. You broke every limit they thought would hold you down. You became the proof that they never had power at all. Imagine this final metaphor. A snake sheds its skin. The old skin dries out and becomes useless, while the snake moves forward stronger, cleaner, more dangerous. That's you. And they're stuck staring at the skin, confused why they can't hold on to something that no longer belongs to you. They can't forget you, chosen one, because your growth was the ultimate checkmate. You outgrew their influence. You outgrew their expectations. You outgrew their control. You outgrew the version of you they needed to feel superior, and now they have to live with the truth. The only thing they ever had power over was a person who no longer exists. That's why their mind won't let you go. That's why your memory stings. That's why they replay everything. That's why your presence still haunts their soul. You didn't just evolve. You escaped. You surpassed. You rose. And the universe always remembers the moment someone becomes untouchable. Number 3. The day. Your silence turned into their confession. Nothing exposes a person faster than the quiet stare of someone who finally sees the truth. You didn't have to leak their secrets, chosen one. You didn't have to put screenshots on display or drag their name through the mud. You simply stopped entertaining the version of them they performed for you, and that alone tore through their mask like paper in the rain. They thought power came from hiding their flaws, but the real power came from you refusing to play along. Here's the part that hits their ego like a steel door to the face. You revealed their character without saying a single word. You didn't out them. You didn't expose them. You didn't sabotage them. You just held your boundaries, and the truth spilled out of them. Imagine someone who always hides in the shadows, talking big behind the curtain. The second you pull the curtain slightly, not even fully, the light hits them and they panic. That's what your growth did. You didn't drag them into the light. They stepped into it trying to prove something and exposed themselves instead. Your silence became the spotlight. Your calm became the evidence. Your distance became the verdict. People fear the ones who know their truth but choose not to weaponize it. And that's exactly why they're haunted. You could have ruined them. You could have humiliated them. You could have told everyone what you saw behind the scenes. But you didn't. Your integrity became the loudest announcement of their character. They keep wondering, how much did you notice? They keep replaying, did they see that moment? They keep stressing, what if others see me the way they did? And the truth is terrifying to them. You noticed everything. You saw the inconsistencies, the lies, the charm they used as camouflage, and you let them expose themselves through the way they reacted when you stopped allowing disrespect. You didn't fight them, you outgrew them. And growth is the one thing their ego can't argue with. The reflection they saw in your calmness was the exact version of themselves they tried to hide. That's the ghost that follows them now. They'll never escape it, because you didn't ruin their reputation. You let them ruin it in front of you. Number 4. The moment your calm cut deeper than any outburst ever could. A silent mind is the sharpest weapon. It slices through games before the other person even knows a battle started. They were waiting for chaos. They were counting on it, actually. They thought you'd crack, blow up, fold, melt down, or lose all sense of direction. That's the reaction manipulators bank on, because emotional storms give them cover. But you didn't storm. You didn't shake. You didn't break. You didn't react at all. You moved with the kind of precision that makes the room colder. And that's when everything shifted. You weren't emotional. You were strategic. Your decisions weren't impulsive. They were exact. Instead of pouring your energy into arguments, you redirected it into clarity. Instead of shouting, you observed. Instead of trying to prove anything, you simply made your move. And nothing rattles a manipulator harder than realizing the person they plan to provoke is operating with a level of calm they can't influence. People can fight your anger. They can't fight your clarity. Imagine this. They're standing there with matches, gasoline, and a smile, fully prepared to burn everything down and blame you for the smoke. But you show up with water, logic, composure, and a plan. Their whole strategy collapses. They can't twist your words because you didn't waste any. They can't twist your emotions because you didn't hand them any. They can't rewrite the narrative because you didn't give them a single messy moment to work with. The precision terrified them. You became the one controlling the tempo. You became the one calling the shots. You became the one they couldn't read, couldn't push, couldn't destabilize. They kept waiting for a meltdown that never came, and the absence of chaos exposed their own instability. Silence backed by self-control is a checkmate no one sees coming. Now they're haunted not by what you said, but by everything you didn't say. Not by what you did, but by how smoothly you executed every move. Not by your emotions, but by your lack of reaction. They realize now that you weren't playing the game. You were studying it. You were watching patterns, tracking shifts, calculating outcomes. They thought they were the player and you were the piece, until the board flipped and you walked away with every advantage. You didn't lose control, you took control, and that's the moment they started losing, silently, completely, and without any way to fight back. Number 5. The day your loyalty stopped being their safety net. Nothing hits harder than realizing the person who always showed up isn't showing up anymore. They swore you'd never leave. They studied your patience like a blueprint and convinced themselves you were permanent, predictable, forever available. They mistook your loyalty for dependency. They read your kindness as captivity. They believed your consistency meant surrender, and because they assumed you'd always stay, they acted like they had endless chances. But chosen one, loyalty isn't infinite. It's earned. And once someone burns through every bridge you quietly rebuilt, they eventually reach the final one, the one you never rebuild again. You didn't scream, didn't curse, didn't slam the door. You simply stepped back, and for the first time, they felt what true loss actually is. Silent, final, irreversible. That's the moment their world shifted, because they never believed you had a limit. They thought your care was automatic, like a light switch they could flip whenever they wanted attention. They didn't expect the switch to stop working. People only respect your loyalty when they realize it comes with consequences. Imagine them walking around like a king in a kingdom they never earned. They thought the throne was theirs because you kept choosing them. But loyalty isn't royalty, it's responsibility. And responsibility ends the second someone decides to abuse it. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left because you finally saw the truth. Staying was hurting you. And that's the part haunting them. You didn't walk away emotionally shattered. You walked away with clarity. You walked away knowing exactly what you deserved. You walked away without hesitation, without bitterness, without dragging the past behind you. That calm exit hurt more than any dramatic breakup ever could. Now they're stuck with questions they never saw coming. Why didn't they fight for me? Why didn't they break down this time? How did their loyalty disappear just like that? Were they done with me for longer than I realized? And the answer burns every time. Your loyalty ended the moment you recognized your value. Once a loyal heart hits its limit, it doesn't bend. It breaks the cycle. They can't appeal that decision. They can't negotiate with it. Loyalty, once betrayed, doesn't respawn. It doesn't reboot. It doesn't regenerate just because they suddenly feel the emptiness they created. You didn't punish them. You educated them. You taught them the one lesson their ego never wanted to learn. Loyalty has a limit, and once crossed, all that's left is the echo of everything they took for granted. Number 6. The day they realized everyone else was just noise. Losing someone who understands you is worse than losing someone who loves you, because love can be replaced, but understanding can't. They thought you were just another person passing through their life. They had no idea you were the only one who actually decoded them. You didn't just listen to their words, you heard what they weren't saying. You didn't just see their behavior, you recognized the emotions hiding underneath it. You didn't just care for them, you translated them, and that's a skill most people don't have. When you were in their life, they felt grounded. You calmed storms they didn't even know how to name. You caught their shifts in energy before they even processed them. You understood their silence like a language. You understood their fears without needing an explanation. You understood their flaws without weaponizing them. You understood their chaos without judging them. Understanding is a rare currency, and they only realized its value the moment you stopped spending it on them. Now, look at them, surrounded by people, yet starving emotionally. Everyone talks, but no one communicates. Everyone shows interest, but no one truly connects. Everyone wants attention, but no one wants depth. They're living in a crowd, but dying in isolation, because the one person who could actually reach them is gone. Imagine them walking into a room full of smiling faces and still feeling empty, Imagine them trying to explain themselves to new people and feeling misunderstood within seconds. Imagine them searching for comfort in conversations that feel surface level, recycled, predictable. That's their reality now. They're not haunted by loneliness, they're haunted by the difference you made. And here comes the gut punch. They never replaced you. They replaced your presence with noise, and noise doesn't heal, noise doesn't understand, noise doesn't soothe, noise doesn't translate the emotional storms inside them. They're not missing love, they're missing recognition. They're not missing your face, they're missing your mind. They're not missing your attention, they're missing your understanding. Connections are easy, being understood is rare. You were the rare one, the one who made them feel seen, not judged, the one who knew how to sit with their darkness without fear, the one who didn't run when their walls cracked, and when you left, the peace you brought left with you. Everyone they meet now feels shallow compared to the depth you carried effortlessly. That's why every new connection falls flat. That's why every conversation feels empty. That's why every attempt at closeness feels forced. They're not grieving you. They're grieving the version of themselves that only existed with you. And that, chosen one, is a wound they'll never fully heal from. Number 7. The day you proved, even forever, has an exit door. Nothing snaps a person back to reality like losing the one they assumed would always stay. They counted on your familiarity like it was a spell, a safety net, a guarantee, a comfort zone they thought you'd never outgrow. They believed the history you shared was enough to keep you anchored, even if they stopped putting in effort. They assumed routine meant loyalty, and loyalty meant you'd never walk away. In their mind, time equaled possession. Your presence equaled permanence. But chosen one, you shattered that illusion with one simple truth. Familiarity isn't ownership. History isn't respect. Comfort isn't commitment. You woke up from the trance they kept you in. You broke the pattern they were relying on. You stopped showing up just because you always did. You stopped accepting crumbs just because you were used to them. You stopped confusing consistency with connection. And once you snapped that cycle, the whole story collapsed. The moment you stopped tolerating the predictable, they realized how replaceable they truly were. Imagine them walking the same worn-out path, expecting to find you at the end of it because you were always there. And then, one day, they reach the destination, and it's empty. The comfort they built around you evaporated because you finally understood that staying in the same place isn't loyalty. It's stagnation. Your evolution became their wake-up call. You didn't drift away. You upgraded. You evolved past the version of yourself that tolerated the repetitive, the lazy, the unchanging. You stopped living on autopilot. You stopped letting routine hypnotize you into accepting less than you deserved. And now, they're haunted by the truth that nothing, not time, not habit, not routine, could keep you locked in place. They thought the chapter would never end. They thought shared memories were enough to override your self-worth. They thought your heart was stuck in yesterday. But you showed them something brutal. Even the most familiar face can disappear overnight when respect disappears first. Now, every time they think of you, it hits them like a cold wind. If someone as loyal, consistent, and dependable as you can walk away, then nothing in their life is guaranteed. Your absence broke their illusion of permanence. Your exit proved comfort isn't control, and your growth showed them the spell was never real. They were just lucky you stayed as long as you did. Number 8. The day life itself slammed the door for you. Losing access to someone is one thing. Losing access because life won't let you near them anymore is a whole different kind of punishment. They love to pretend you cut them off, that you were being dramatic or emotional, but you and I both know the truth. You didn't end this. Evolution did. Life stepped in like a cosmic bouncer and said, "Yeah, you're not allowed in this section anymore." And nothing bruises their ego more than realizing the separation wasn't personal, it was universal. Your shift wasn't messy, it wasn't chaotic, it wasn't a fight. Your life simply rose to a level their frequency couldn't reach. You didn't slam the door. It closed on its own when your energy got too high, your peace got too protected, and your clarity became too sharp for their chaos to survive around you. Sometimes you don't outgrow people on purpose, you just grow and they stop fitting. Imagine two radio stations. One keeps evolving, upgrading, becoming clearer and sharper. The other stays fuzzy, static-filled, repeating the same old noise. You didn't block them. You moved to a different wavelength they literally cannot tune into. Every attempt they make to reach you now feels like grabbing smoke, empty, hopeless, pointless. Life did what you were too loyal, too patient, too compassionate to do yourself. It removed what couldn't go where you're headed. It filtered out anything that couldn't handle your next level. It protected your peace the moment you realized peace is more important than history. Now they're sitting there, feeling the distance like a cold draft they can't escape. They can sense your absence in the air, not because you're being petty, but because they no longer have permission to access someone operating on a higher plane. When the universe blocks someone from your life, it's never a mistake. It's a correction. And that's what haunts them. The separation wasn't a breakup. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't a decision you made in anger. It was life stepping in and saying, "This connection has expired." They weren't cut off. They were phased out. They weren't rejected. They were outgrown. And nothing stings them deeper than knowing the universe decided you were too evolved for them. Number 9. The day your kindness became their lifelong haunting. Nothing tortures a guilty soul more than realizing the person they mistreated handled them with more honor than they ever earned. You treated them better than they deserved, and that truth clings to them like smoke they can't wash off. You held your composure while they acted reckless. You stayed grounded while they moved selfishly. You stayed real while they played roles. You kept your standards high, even when their behavior sank lower than you expected. And that contrast, that gap between who you were and who they pretended to be, is the scar they can't get rid of. They weren't prepared for someone who could see their flaws and still choose grace. They weren't ready for someone who could recognize manipulation and still respond with maturity. You didn't explode, expose, or retaliate. You outclassed. You outgrew. You out-elevated. And nothing hurts a manipulator more than being handled with respect they didn't earn, because it highlights their lack of character in the most brutal way possible. Your kindness wasn't weakness. It was discipline, and they know it now. Imagine them replaying the moments where they acted careless, selfish, or dismissive, while you remained steady. Every memory is a reminder of how wildly mismatched your intentions were with theirs. They brought chaos. You brought calm. They brought excuses. You brought effort. They brought ego. You brought heart. That imbalance is what's haunting them now. And here's the gut punch they refuse to admit. They will never meet another person who handles them the way you did. Not because you were perfect, but because you were genuine. You didn't treat them based on who they were. You treated them based on who you were. That's what they lost. That's what they can't replace. That's what every new connection fails to deliver. They thought they could upgrade from you, but instead, every new person feels like a downgrade in emotional quality. You disappeared, but your standards stayed behind, and now they're trapped, trying to meet a benchmark they can't reach. They aren't just missing you. They're missing how they felt when you were the one giving them grace. They're missing the version of themselves they only ever experienced in your presence. That's the real punishment, not your silence, not your distance, but the brutal truth that you treated them better than their character could handle. And they'll never experience that level of care again. Number 10. The day you shattered the loop they thought would run forever. A manipulator's worst nightmare isn't being confronted. It's being ignored by the person who finally figured out the pattern. They lived inside cycles like it was their personal playground. Lie, apologize, manipulate, repeat. It was the same choreography every time, like a tired sitcom rerun they assumed you'd keep watching because it was familiar. They depended on that repetition. It kept them in charge. It kept you predictable. It kept them feeling powerful. But chosen one, you did the one thing they never planned for. You stepped out of the loop, not temporarily, not to teach them a lesson, not to wait for them to change. You ended the entire cycle. Breaking a pattern is easy. Refusing to go back to it? That's the revolution. You didn't slam the door. You didn't rage. You didn't demand closure. You simply stopped participating. And that's what broke them. Manipulators don't know how to function without a reaction. Their whole identity depends on pulling strings, poking wounds, triggering responses, and feeding off the chaos they create. Without you responding, they had nothing to control, nothing to twist, nothing to manipulate. Imagine a puppeteer lifting their hands, only to realize the strings are cut. Imagine a fisherman throwing bait, but the ocean is empty. Imagine someone performing a magic trick for an audience that walked out. That's what your silence felt like. You didn't pause the game. You destroyed it. They keep waiting for the old rhythm, the argument, the reconciliation, the emotional reset. But all they hear now is silence. And silence is a brutal teacher. It forces them to sit with themselves. It forces them to feel the emptiness that their manipulation once masked. It forces them to face the truth. The cycle only worked because you allowed it. And now that you've evolved past the pattern, they're stuck replaying questions they can't answer. Why didn't they react this time? What changed in them? How did they outgrow something I counted on? Why does their silence hurt more than any argument? Because, chosen one, you didn't just leave. You leveled up. You reached a version of yourself that no longer fits inside their old script. When growth breaks the cycle, the past can't follow you. Now they're trapped in the ruins of a system that depended on your participation. They miss the version of you who tried. They miss the version of you who forgave. They miss the version of you who fought for clarity. But that version evolved. That version refuses to shrink. That version refuses to repeat history. Nothing haunts a manipulator more than realizing the cycle they worshipped ended without warning, ended without drama, ended without permission, and ended because you finally woke up. Number 11. The day you checkmated them without touching a single piece. The loud ones play the game. The quiet ones master the board. They thought they were running things. They really believed their little tricks, half-truths and emotional bait were enough to keep you tangled. They saw themselves as the player and you as the piece they could move whenever it suited them. But the whole time they were busy pushing pawns, you were watching everything. The patterns, the openings, the weaknesses, the ego behind every move. You didn't win because you were aggressive. You won because you finally understood the entire structure of the game. Imagine someone bragging about their strategy while literally playing checkers on a chessboard. That's them. Meanwhile, you were 10 steps ahead, studying the board quietly, predicting their next move before they even thought of it. You weren't reacting. You were calculating. You weren't confused. You were confirming. Every silence, every pause, every time you refused to argue was a move. And they didn't see it because they were too focused on trying to trigger you. The moment you stop reacting, you start winning. Your calm was the checkmate. Your clarity was the weapon. Your silence was the victory move they never saw coming. They thought you were stepping back because you were overwhelmed. In reality, you were stepping back because your view of the board got clearer. You saw how predictable they were. You saw how repetitive their tactics had become. You saw how their ego made them sloppy, loud, and reckless. You saw the whole game for what it was, and once you understood it, you couldn't unsee it. And when you walked away without a speech, without exposing them, without announcing your exit, that was the final, brutal checkmate. Quiet, absolute, irreversible. The kind of ending that leaves no rematch. Now they're stuck replaying everything, wondering, when did they figure me out? How long were they watching? Why didn't I see it happening? Did they plan this the whole time? And the answer burns every time. You won because you became the strategist. They lost because they were too busy playing pretend. That's why they can't forget you. The game ended before they realized you'd already claimed the entire board. And listen, chosen one, now you see exactly why your silence, your growth, and your final move left a mark they can't erase. You didn't just walk away, you transformed, and that transformation became their haunting. If this message hit home, press the like button if you haven't already, and if you're still not part of this family, make sure to hit subscribe. Stay locked in, stay rising, and remember, the checkmate was never an accident. It was your evolution.